My name's Sonia Martin and my company is Rooted Lavender. And I was asked by Ellen to come and meet with you virtually today or in video format and give you my bits of wisdom or bits of a collection of things to help support you, this very important job as caregivers in this unprecedented, uncharted waters area that we find ourselves in. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. A little bit about myself. As I said, I'm Sonia Martin and my company is Rooted Lavender. I ran a daycare for 13 years out of my home and did a lot of training in child care development 1 and 2 through the Early On Center. I'm a registered yoga teacher with my 200 and my 300 hour, with additional training for senior citizens, those that have had trauma, as well as with children. And with that, I'm also a meditation teacher, a 500-hour meditation teacher. Before I was at home with my children running the daycare, I was a behaviorist. So I worked in the community in daycare centers, as well as in family homes and with parents and in schools, and worked with children that had a variety of extra things happening, whether they were on the autism spectrum, had difficulties with sensory processing, ADHD, those types of things. I am a surrogate and I'm a doula, I'm a La Leche League leader, and really this all fits into a basket of family wellness, particularly focused on children and babies and development of the young, as well as family support and women pre and postnatal. I bring to the table what I've learned, and I'm always learning from others. I please encourage you, I will be giving Ellen a handout or some extra resource material that she can present to you. And please don't hesitate to ask me questions or reach out to me. I would love to hear how things are going. I think for many people, this is an area that we have, certain fears, and we're adjusting to new routines, and maybe you're continuing to work or you can't work, or there's financial strains and you're managing with parents and you're managing new rules or guidelines. And I think what care providers are dealing with is maybe a variety of different situations, certainly those that I've been in contact with. And I wish support to all of you. This is not easy, and the results of this outbreak are immeasurable. I really encourage us to look at the positive things that are happening with our environment and really trying as hard as we can to be present and really focus on the now. As Eckhart Tolle, there's an author that you may have heard about, and he writes a book called The Power of Now. I have a selection of things I want to talk to you about today, and I've made some notes. The first thing I want to do is go over 3 breathwork strategies, and then we'll look at some basic meditation tools and what I call micro practices, ways we can bring this into our daycares and into our days. Some rituals, and gathering from that some of the Ayurvedic practices, which is a sort of like a sister science to yoga, or a complementary wisdom. I will show you 3 poses, and these are quite simple, and what people think of when they think of yoga is the actual physical asanas, or the practice of the physical movements. And really a couple of ending with some lifestyle ideas or strategies. And this may be brand new to you, or this may be very familiar. And if it's familiar to you, wonderful. Then I encourage you to go back to basics and go back to what it is that you find that works for you in times of heightened stress, emotions, fear, anxiety, certainly depression, anything that brings you into a state of vulnerability. The first thing I want to focus on is breath. And the idea here is that it's always with us. And if we can control the breath, we can control the mind. And this obviously relates to all the adults, but many of the things that I do involve children, and I have a really strong interest and experience and desire bringing mindfulness and yoga and play to children. And I'd be happy to work with any of you for more ideas. It just won't be able to be fit into in the time period today. So the first basic breath that we always want to start with, it's a really foundational breath. Another breath work moves off of this, is called the 3-part breath. And the 3 parts are little belly, which is this space really below the navel and above the pubic bone. And the second part we focus on is the side ribs, focusing on expanding to the sides as well as front and back. And the third part is the collarbone. Closing down the eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And sitting in a comfortable position. I happen to be sitting with my knees bent behind me, or crisscross applesauce, as we would say in childcare. Shoulders can come back and down. You can either join me or you can learn and follow along later. It helps to close down the eyes, let the face be soft, removing tension from the jaw, from the crease, ironing out that space between the eyebrows, softening the forehead. We're going to breathe in with our nose, or as I say with my children, sniffing a flower. And on the inhale, the belly rises. And then the next part is the rib cage expands. And we take the breath all the way up to the collarbone. And then we exhale collarbone, side ribs, exhaling out the mouth, little belly. We do this 3 more times. Inhaling with the nose, little belly, side ribs, collarbone all the way up, and just watching and guiding the breath on the exhale out the mouth, collarbone, side ribs come in, little belly. One last time. Inhaling and exhaling. So briefly, that's 3-part breath. It takes some practice. You don't usually get it the first time, and that's okay. We're not used to breathing with our belly. In society, we've had this shallow breathing. But you watch the next time you're with a very small baby, they will be breathing with their belly. I encourage you to practice this in a seated position like we are now, while lying in bed before you go to bed or before you start your day, and at the end of the day, as well as in a standing position. Coming into breath and coming into that deep breath, that alone is a life-changing practice. The second one I'd like to show you is called Take 5 breath. And this can be done in a couple of ways. Sometimes we don't want to actually have our hand in front of us. And if that's the case, then I encourage you to put your hand on your lap and do the same thing in a more subtle way. But for now, let's bring our left hand, palm facing, in front of us. Take the Peter pointer of your right hand. Again, if I was working with kids, I might use my imagination and encourage their imagination as well. And this might be a race car or a train, but for us, we're just going to keep it simple. I'm going to inhale with my nose on the outside of my finger, like this. And my belly rises. And then I exhale, coming down the opposite side. Shoulders soften. Inhale. Moving up the side of the next finger. Exhale. Let everything be heavy and melting. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And last is the thumb. Inhale. Exhale. As you go about your routine, try to fit in these micro practices just before you put the food on the table. While you've slipped into the washroom to grab that ever precious bathroom break. Maybe on your break, and believe me, I realize how hard and long these days are. Toughest job I ever had was the 13 years I did daycare, and I've worked in a lot of different settings at this point. Sometimes we need to take 10. You do the same thing with the opposite hand. And then seeing how that feels, right? Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Encouraging that belly breathing like we started with that Dirga breath or 3-part breath. Inhale, belly always rises or expands. Exhale, navel comes towards spine. It's like the navel's kissing the spine. And the last basic breathing strategy I'm going to give you today is called an equal part breath. So if you've been sitting with me, maybe you want to switch your legs, coming into a different position. If you've been crisscross applesauce, you may want to switch and bring the other leg. Again, let's roll our shoulders up and away. Maybe a couple little neck circles. Softening down the eyes if that's comfortable. Shoulders remain heavy. And this last breath technique we're going to work on today translates to equal part breath. You're going to choose a count that's comfortable for you for the inhale. We inhale through the nose. A count of about 3, 4, 5, or 6. Whatever's your natural rhythm, you're going to inhale for that count, and then you're going to exhale for the same count. So for example, we can inhale for 4 through our nose, and then exhale for 4 out the mouth. And again, inhaling for 4, exhaling for 4. Trying to breathe with our belly one last time. It's a very calming, centering, grounding breath. When you lose count, and it will happen, that's okay. We're training the brain, we're making new neural pathways, we're training ourselves in a new behavior. Gently and persistently come back. You get to 3, your mind has gone off, it's wandered, this monkey brain, it's okay. Bring it back, bring it back. All right, the next I want to talk about, after we've maybe feeling a little more grounded and a little more settled, is some meditation tools. So I like to use meditation tools as more of a micro practice. I know what it's like to be a busy care provider, and maybe many of you are busy parents, and maybe we don't have or haven't developed the habit or have the desire or feel we don't have the time to get up at 6 in the morning and spend 45 minutes meditating. If you do that, and if that's happening for you, that's amazing. Of course, that's going to be 10 times the benefits. But for some, that's just not realistic right now. I would absolutely encourage it, but it's also okay to start somewhere in between. So I want you to think about going through your day, and let's pick the example of hand washing. So even before this practice that we're in right now of very vigilant hand washing is a part of a caregiver's job more than many. And I certainly know what it's like to have the bleeding hands and fingers after the end of the day because you've washed your hands so much. So why don't we turn that into a micro practice? And this micro practice can be done with many things. So same thing when you're walking up the stairs to take the little ones up to nap. That was what, in my situation, the kids napped upstairs. Or maybe you're popping through the same doorway to flip your laundry. But find a ritual you do every day, and repeatedly every day, and come into a sense of awareness and a sense of noticing. And if we can become mindful, which really the definition of mindfulness is present moment awareness without judgment. And so we look to our senses, we look to sensations within the body, and try not to have the mind going forward, what's the lunch plan, or backwards. I wish I hadn't, I shouldn't have said that. What if, I didn't say that, those kind of things. Forward or backwards. Forward tends to be more anxiety producing thoughts. Backwards tends to be a little bit more depressive in nature. So let's go back to this ritual of hand washing, turning that into a micro practice. I know with the kids we're doing singing, but I also know you do this on your own. So if we can break it down, smelling the soap, really coming into the sensation on our hands in terms of tactile sensation. Maybe we're noticing the look, of our fingernails or the iridescent bubbles. Maybe we're noticing the sound of our hands rubbing together. But we take this as a micro practice and really dive into all the sensations happening around hand washing and pause, right? This is a micro pause where the mind is very focused on a ritual and the body and the senses, and it's not focusing on areas we don't want it to go. And if we do this 10, 12 times a day, we've already produced those little gaps in the mind, those spaces where we're not on autopilot. And that's where the real transformation starts to occur. And that's where we really get to build those neural pathways and create that spaciousness and that allowance for a more calm state. The next piece is what I would call a gap meditation for ease of understanding. And so it pairs really well with that equal part breath that we were doing. And this is a simple meditation where you're going to inhale, find the count you want, exhale. So let's again keep consistent with the inhale of 4, exhale of 4. And this time I want you to notice the gap at the end of the inhale. So it's an inhale for 4, gap, exhale for 4, out the mouth, gap, inhale for 4, belly rises, exhale for 4. Hand can come to the belly if that helps. Gap. Inhale for 4. Notice the gap. Gap. So instead of really being focused on the count, we're noticing the gaps. If it helps to drop the count and just let the breath be natural, that's okay too. Again, when you lose count or lose track of the gaps, it's okay. You start again. The next thing you know, you've been doing this for 30 seconds and the mind is on next week's crafts. It's okay. Bring it back, right? Or in this case, maybe our mind starts going to finances or other big things that are happening for us right now. Same principles apply no matter what's happening in the world. We come back to that space, that tiny little space in between the end of the inhale and the end of the exhale. We're not retaining the breath. We're not holding the breath. The breath is slow and even, no strain, and paying attention to the gaps. My third sort of meditation tool that I wanted to give you is something a little bit more practical, and that is the Insight Timer. Now, some of you may have already used some apps. There's some fantastic apps out there. Calm app is one of them, but the one that I took the mindfulness-based stress reduction training, which many of you may have done, and I did that with a gentleman named Lee Smith here in town, a local psychologist, probably about 5 years ago, pardon me. And he taught me about the Insight Timer app. So it's easy to find in your Google Play store. It's free. There's the way it's set up is you can time yourself meditating, which I would suggest is more of an advanced skill, to be honest. But what I like about it is it has many, 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 many recorded meditations. So they've got categories. If you're brand new to this, if you align with say Buddhism, if you want one for helping you sleep, or a progressive relaxation, that's sort of tightening and loosening the muscles. It has many, many famous people. If you start to, oh, I really like Tara Brach or Eckhart Tolle, who I mentioned before, you can pick, I want a 1 minute meditation. I'm just beginning. I want 30 seconds. I want 10 minutes before I go to bed at night, and I want it to be about helping me sleep. I really recommend this app in the sense that not everybody does as well when they're self-guided, and so I think that this is a really good strategy for coming into a meditation practice with some guidance. And it's you can do it with music, you can do it without music, you can see who in the world right now is meditating. It's a really great app. So again, it's Insight Timer, as in I have an insight or an idea, and timer like a watch. And the picture, the icon is like a little music bowl, like a I'm blanking on the name right now, but you'll recognize it, a singing bowl. Next, I want to go over some rituals that I think can be great for continuing with our routines, and really are just general lifestyle wellness strategies. In Ayurvedic yoga, or Ayurvedic medicine rather, there's considered 3 pillars for health. The first is your sleep. The second is sex or relationships. And the third is eating. And really, I'm going to touch a little bit on the sleeping and the eating. What I do want to say about relationships is that consider that a pillar in your stool, and whatever your relationship looks like, whether you're single, whether you're in a partnerhood, it does need equal attention, in terms of these thirds. And right now, what I'm really enjoying seeing is some really beautiful things happening, both in communities, even though we're keeping our, 6 feet apart, but also in virtually. So lots and lots of leaders are popping on and giving wisdom, and there's every kind of group of people that enjoy collective things coming together and supporting so many online teachings and all sorts of things. I would caution that I don't believe in taking in too much right now in terms of 6 hours on YouTube or Facebook or the newspaper. No, continue to take your breaks, but look for things that are uplifting and positive. Maybe it's a great podcast, or maybe it's a great person that you admire that you would like to reach out to, or wonderful phone calls. So that's sort of the piece I would like to say around relationships, that keep that a pillar, and whatever that looks like, is that if that's a marriage for you, if you're single, but connecting with others in a positive way and an uplifting way. The second is around sleep. And again, when I was running the daycare, I had families coming at 7 and leaving at 6. I really understand their long days. And of course, our sleep affects our mental health and on and on and on. So it has to be one of the pillars. And just a couple of tips around sleep hygiene that you may have heard before, but that includes making your place that you sleep somewhat sacred, not with screens, somewhat a little bit cooler, maybe a weighted blanket. Some people have a fan. We need it to be dark for serotonin. I like a lavender eye pillow myself. In terms of sounds, again, not a TV in the background, not anything too stimulating before we try to sleep. So that can be anything from a to-do list pile in your bedroom, including laundry, to too much coffee, or too much excitement, or too much sugar, or violence. I have to be really aware of the programming that I watch. I'm prone to anxiety, so I don't watch anything highly exciting. Maybe it's a hot bath, maybe it's a hot shower, maybe it's reading. I've got a crossword addiction happening right now, but setting up the evening for that wind down time. A lot of people do some gentle stretching or bring in a meditation practice, but finding those ways to encourage restful sleep is very important. And The next around eating, when I gave you my bio, it was clear that I'm not a holistic nutritionist, although I've worked with many. But from the yoga perspective, we talk about sort of a sattvic diet or a pure diet. And what I'd like to say for this third pillar, relationships, sleep, and nutrition, is that of course we know we are what we eat. So this is things like eating a rainbow diet, finding organic when we can, using things that are closest to the source of nature, a variety in your foods that comes from the rainbow. In Ayurvedic medicine, they use a lot of herbs and spices, so things that are beneficial would be things like your cardamom and your turmeric. Turmeric's an anti everything. I make a tonic every morning that has honey and turmeric and lemon, having acidic things, so a copper water bottle. Those are just a few little pieces rather than things heavily processed, heavily frozen, heavily coming from a factory, from a warehouse, things that are more in their pure and natural state. When I talk to families, again, I'm a big fan of things that can put a whole bunch into one item. So I like to have a smoothie and a muffin and a soup and a stew because I can put microgreens and my hemp hearts. I can put so much in it. They're portable, they're handy. We know that a big part of childcare is the food and the food preparation, and that includes you. And the only other piece I would add to this, and I certainly did this in amongst the babies in high chairs and wiping up their hands and wiping up their spilled milk, was that I would be sitting over a counter, not sitting, and shoving food into me. And I really encourage what we call, I've read before, is a peace pause. It's a luxury, and I know this, but please try to sit with the kids, take in your food, use that as a micro practice, take in the smells. You're ingesting the emotion that is coming around that space. If you're ingesting anger and anger's happening, you're ingesting it. And really, even a micro practice of a peace pause for the first couple of bites. So it's not only just what is on our plates, but it's also how we take it in. And from here, I want to go into our second last category, and that is poses. So I'm going to describe these poses and for video purposes, and then, pardon me, and then I'm going to add links so that you can actually see what I'm talking about when I send the handout to Ellen. The first pose that I think is a really beneficial pose can be done in one of two ways, and I was taught it was called Velcro Man, or if you wish, Velcro Person. And what that means is that you stand up against a wall with your bottom against the wall. So I would be, backing up here, but I would be standing. And then I'm just a little bit away from the wall, maybe 2 or 3 inches. My buttocks is touching the wall. And I'm standing still in what we might describe as mountain pose. So my shoulders are rolled back and down. My feet are a bit hip width apart. Even amount of pressure on both feet. And then with every exhale, we're going to Velcro ourselves, peel the Velcro off the wall. So with every exhale, I come down a little further, a little further, a little further, and what essentially ends in a forward fold with a really nice stretch of the back. Other option is to slowly come down into a forward fold. And the reason I picked this as a beginning strategy or a simple pose is because there's a lot of benefits just in this pose alone. It's good for your mind. It's good for calming. It's good for your back. It's good for your hamstrings. Anything that connects us to the earth, and in this case, our head to the earth, literally grounds the mind. And then when you get there, when you're folded all the way over, maybe you clasp your elbows, have a little rock from side to side. Maybe you pedal your feet, bend one knee, and straighten the other. And then you're going to do the same thing that you did coming down as coming up. You're going to inhale, through the nose, and when you exhale out the mouth, you're going to slowly, slowly rise one vertebrae at a time till you're coming back against the wall. So that one is called Velcro person or Velcro man. And essentially it's a slowed down forward fold. The whole practice, you can make it as small, as short, or as long as you wish, but I'd say a good 5 minutes. Again, a micro practice. The second one I want to introduce is called Feet Up the Wall, is the basic translation. And this has probably been one of the most profound poses that I've learned. It feels a little funny sometimes getting your body into this position, but in every body that I have taught, and I've taught many, many people of every kind of ability and size and experience and flexibility, everybody can get into it that I've seen. Maybe with a few props, maybe with a few suggestions and help, but it's an extremely powerful pose. It's very, very good for regulating your blood pressure and the synovial fluids within, in and around your joints. It's very good for your tummy and your digestion. It's good for the mind. It's good for the chest and the breathing and the heart. So what it involves, and I will describe it and then I will be able to send you photos, is you're going to take your body, I may be able to actually do this, you're going to take your hip to the baseboard. Doesn't matter which hip, it could be the left hip, it could be the right hip. And you're going to move it all the way up to the baseboard. And then from here, your head is going to slide away from you while you move your buttocks closer. So you can kind of lean back, and you want your buttocks up against the wall. So I have to shimmy closer. Now you might just be able to see my feet. And now I have sort of a 45-degree angle with my legs and my body bending at the hips. And I can have a bend in my knees if that's more comfortable. I can put the soles of my feet together. I can cross my legs. I can go into a V. I'm going to sit here and let all the blood drain into my hips, into my tummy, into my chest, into my head. Very good for calming and anxiety reducing. And then when you want to get out of this, you bring the feet down, roll onto one side, what I described as sort of a fetal position, and then slowly with two hands sit yourself back up. So I hope you were able to see a tiny peek of that, given my small little